Bird, 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 bird. Get him, yeah! Ron Bain was right. Ron Bain was right.
I'm feeling spry. Hey everybody, it's Ron Bain with the Hunting Dog Podcast. 21st of August is upon us, which means Tagus' test day in Wisconsin is upon us too. 6 days from now, I'll be running Tagus in his natural ability test. Man, it's been a long time since I ran a puppy in a test. I mean, a real long time. I mean, I've judged them, but I haven't been on that side of the fence in many years. So wish me luck on that. And I want to always thank my Patreon patrons first, who should know this. If you are a new patron this month, last month, the month before, or the month before that, or the month before that, everyone who's joined up for Patreon since January 1st, that means you've got, 10 days to do it if you haven't done it. Go to patreon.com, Patreon, Hunting Dog Podcast. Sign up, become a patron. You will be in the running. Your name will be in the hat for a Garmin Alpha 10 with collar. That ain't no cheap giveaway. So if you want your name in the hat, and every month your name will stay in the hat for upcoming Garmin giveaways. And there's going to be a deck drawer giveaway coming up too. So Patreon patrons, that's the place to be. If you don't want, if you don't gamble, and I understand you don't, that's fine. That's fine. But if you want to try to win something, and just for all my other listeners out there that are patrons from other years, if you stay a patron, so anybody who was a patron in 2021, their name is in the hat twice. And then you back it up. 2020, their name is in the hat 3 times. So see, there's another benefit besides all the discounts you get on some of my sponsors, like Pike Gear, technical clothing for the upland hunter. I'll be wearing the Kiowa pants down in Virginia dove hunting. I guarantee you I'll be wearing the Kiowa pants because it's always hot in the opener of dove season down there. And I don't want to sit there in shorts, and have ticks running up my legs and distracting me from my proficiency with a 20 gauge on morning doves. But I will be rocking my Pike Gear from then right to North Dakota, on to Wyoming, into October, up in the UP. I mean, I'll pretty much look like a walking billboard. It's terrible. I mean, it's all I'll be wearing probably starting the 3rd of September. It's all you should be wearing for hunting season. If you're getting ready to go hunting and you don't have Onyx maps, which I almost believe is impossible. In fact, a guy wrote me the other day about the Upland Institute, and he said he wanted to see some previews of the. We don't have it set up where you can see a commercial about each class of the Upland Institute. You can see what it's all about. But Onyx Elite members have a deal where they can actually peek behind the curtain and see about 13 of our actual segments and then make that calculated, intelligent decision to train their own dog. That's another thing you get with Onyx. Yeah, you get so much with Onyx. It's kind of like what you get with Boss shot shells. They have brought copper plating to bismuth shells, which nobody else does, and given you a non-tox, deadly combination of copper-plated bismuth to go duck hunting, to go bird hunting, to go dove hunting, to go wherever you go. Just go, you know what? Just go non-tox. It's especially like when I'm in North Dakota, I'm going to be hopping from private to public and private to public. I am not going to be messing around with 2 different boxes of shotgun shells. That's all I shoot. That's all you should shoot. Shoot, if you ever had, boy, that was a hard segue to go from Boss shot shells to Walton's. But Walton's has everything but the meat. They really, really do. I implore you to get their 2022 home processing catalog. If you don't look at that and drool like the first time you saw Cabela's catalog, I mean, I know we don't all shop at Cabela's anymore, but back in the day, boy, when a Cabela's catalog came out, just page over page. That's what the Walton's home processing catalog. You will be surprised at what you will thank me, but you will curse me because you're like, great, I just spent another $500 in kitchen gear to prepare my very expensive game meat. If you think about what we spend for a bird, just a bird for dinner, you won't mind spending something good for processing from Walton's. Same thing, talk about spending money. Gunner Kennels and food crates. Sure, you can go, if you're going to price shop, okay, price shop. Then you're going to end up with something inferior to a Gunner Kennel. If you're going to go for quality shop, there's really only one choice. Seriously, one choice. The absolute strongest, toughest, crash-resistantest. Is that a word? I don't think so. Anyway, crash-tested, the safest thing that you can put your dog in while you travel. I mean, and don't say, no, he rides shotgun and he wears a shoulder harness and I've got an airbag. You know airbags on anybody under 90 pounds could kill him. So do not buckle your dog into the front seat in a harness like I've actually seen people do, thinking that the airbag would save them. No, you put your dog in a Gunner Kennel, you put your Purina Pro Plan in a Gunner food crate, and now you're keeping two things safe that are important to you. Yeah. Quality. Everything. I'm looking at this list that I have to get through here. Garmin. Like, tell me who makes a better tracking and training unit than Garmin. I mean, write me. Every time I put this challenge up there, I get 0 emails because nobody conquers navigation and training like Garmin. And nowhere in the world will you find a staff to sell you Garmin products that would be anywhere comparable to what you'll find when you call W Hunting Supply to order your Garmin collar or any other gear that you need for your dog. That's right, W Hunting Supply. It's like shopping with family. And deck drawer systems, I mean, they're a family. Like I said, I think I said this about 5 podcasts ago. I swear to God that Addison Edmonds, who owns Gunner Kennels, secretly owns deck drawer systems. It's the only other thing I saw in the gear and equipment world now in my 3rd year with my deck drawer system. The thing is totally bulletproof. Now, I don't mean you can shoot into it. Well, actually, probably could. I don't know why you would. But the deck drawer system on my bumpy road in all the travels I do around this country, everything, every piece, every cargo pocket, the drawers, the locks, everything works. I was shocked. I kind of figured, all right, something's going to go with this thing. No, I installed it myself, put it together, and I couldn't be happier. You won't be happier unless you put a Weatherby shotgun in your deck drawer. You can get the deck drawer gun rack that'll hold 3 guns. I suggest that one of them, at least one of them, be a Weatherby shotgun. Whether you're an autoloader fan or an over-under fan, the Orion is my choice. Everybody, where I go, I pull that drawer open. Everybody goes, "Oh, is that the Orion?" And I mean, I don't get anybody going, yeah, No, they're like, wow, that is a nice shotgun. Yeah, it is a nice shotgun. And Purina Pro Plan is it's Purina Pro Plan. You already put it in your food crate because you already got your food crate. You already feed Purina. So why am I preaching to the choir? Because there's a few people who skip church and don't join the choir, and they think that their dog needs something like aardvark and rattlesnake mix or sea duck and elderberry because he's got a sensitive stomach. Okay, if that's your dog, I'm sorry. You probably aren't putting him in a Gunner. You probably aren't putting a Garmin around his neck. You haven't bought anything from W. You wouldn't even think of a deck drawer system. So obviously, you wouldn't buy Purina Pro Plan. Here's something I could talk you into, though. I think, even if you don't feed Purina Pro Plan, Canine Athlete by Wilderness Athlete. They make products for your dog's nutrition, for your dog's hydration, for your dog's digestion. And then they make all the other stuff that I live on, like my joint advantage, I'm not. Boy, if I may lightning strike me right now, if I'm making this up. Now, there's two factors here. I'm coming at my right knee with a double approach, right? I know strength is important. I know you have to have knee strength, and I know I literally haven't been working in the field for 2 years. I'm retired, right? A couple trips here, a couple walks here. My knee is ready. The doctor says my knee is ready for replacement. But a month ago, I got joint advantage, and about a month and a half ago, I started getting back into yoga. Now, don't laugh, okay? First of all, I've been doing yoga for at least, I think it's a safe bet that I've done it off and on and more on for the last 10 years than most of you people have. And if you're thinking that's like funny, no, it's not funny. You do some yoga. It'll kick your butt, and it will with tree pose and chair pose. Between that and joint advantage, because I've done yoga all these years off and on with my wife and with classes and with my friends in Virginia. I mean, I used to go to yoga 3 times a week. My knee didn't feel better, but it was strong. Okay, in strength. Anyway, so now my combination of joint advantage and yoga, I'm not planning on getting a knee replacement next year. Unless something happens in hunting season, I cannot believe it. And that comes from Wilderness Athlete. There. Whew. What was that? 11 minutes? 14? That's not ridiculous. I've gone on for longer. I hope you enjoyed this episode with Nick Green from MUCC. That's Muskegon. I always do that. Michigan United Conservation Clubs. He is the editor, and not only editor, he wears many hats of the MUCC magazine. MUCC, we are so lucky in the state of Michigan that we have an umbrella organization that covers all of the sporting, all the hook and bullet clubs, all the NGOs. They get their power from MUCC. Now, a lot of states have something like this, but none of them have one that's staffed like this. Literally sits in the capital of Lansing, and when a bad bill comes along, they shoot it out of the sky with a Scud missile. And then we talk dogs, and we talk training, and we talk puppies, and we talk everything. So, anyway, can't wait to report to you next week when I get done with my natural ability test. And if you're an Instagram follower, I will have to put that results up on Instagram next Saturday, the 27th. So be looking for that. I will put it up there, and I will give you the score, and I will give you the rundown, and I will give you, that's it. That's all I can think of. Love you guys. Love you girls. Love you girls more. Hey. Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
All right. Let's try that.
Recording in progress.
Wow. Boy. Hey, everybody. It's Ron Bain with the Hunting Dog Podcast. I am with what I would consider now, after a few years, an old friend of mine that we haven't hunted together, Nick Green from Michigan United Conservation Clubs. And I actually heard Nick on another podcast. Of course, you've been making the podcast rounds, Nick. I mean, I don't know. Did I start something back in 2019 with you that took off? Because I keep seeing your name on other people's podcasts. I'm a little jealous. So I thought, I'm going to get Nick on to talk a little Michigan policy, nationwide policy, what's going on at MUCC. So, Nick Green, welcome to the show. How are you?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me, Ron. Yeah, I think back in 2018 or 19 when we did that first podcast, that was probably one of my first. And since then, I've done dozens and dozens and dozens and continue to be on the podcast rounds as issues come up, and MUCC continues to try to do our good work.
Give everybody, that 30,000 view foot. I mean, I hope that most of our Michigan hunters know what MUCC is. And I've told people I was guilty when I moved to Michigan. I just thought you guys made a television show, on Thursday nights. I didn't know. But give everybody a little feel for what it is, and then we'll take it from there.
Yeah, so Michigan United Conservation Clubs is the largest statewide conservation organization. So we are a tent for all things conservation, wildlife, species, habitats, forests, all of it. We were started in 1937, so coming out of that Dust Bowl era, when a lot of our conservation organizations like Ducks Unlimited, many of them were starting then. We were starting to see the North American model of conservation take hold. We were really founded on the principle of keeping politics out of natural resources. So the specific issue at the time, and it's funny because we'll probably return to this issue later, is the Department of Conservation, or excuse me, the governor wanted to appoint the director of the Department of Conservation. We wanted that to stay within the Natural Resources Commission, its version at the time.
Right.
And we felt that a public body just making that decision was better than one person. So fast forward, here we are again dealing with a lot of these same issues through states throughout the United States. But we were founded then. We've worked on many iconic pieces of legislation. So the Michigan Natural Resources Trust Fund, the Michigan Bottle Bill, where you get a 10-cent deposit. We were one of the first in the nation to enact such policy. MUCC led that charge. We spent a lot of money doing that. We've worked on things like Proposal G in Michigan, which we'll probably talk about later as well. And that is really a requirement that management decisions are, dictated by sound science, and really tries to do away with unilateral decision making or ballot box biology. So policy is kind of that main trunk of the tree we started with. But since then, we do an on-the-ground program that's award-winning and has been recognized by Outdoor Life. We go out to public land around Michigan, work with our Department of Natural Resources biologists, and bring folks out to public land, plant trees, clear shooting lanes. We're actually doing a August 27th sharptail project in Seney, where we'll be working on some lekking ground for sharptails up there. So that on-the-ground program has been a really good way to connect non-consumptive users with consumptive users. So we're able to show folks who don't hunt or don't necessarily know how conservation is funded. We're able to connect the dots for them and have them meet some of those people who care about these species.
Yeah.
Another big part of our organization is our youth camp. We've put 58,000 kids through our youth camp since its inception. It's fun now to actually meet those people, 20, 30 years later, talk to them about where they're at, how that seed of conservation was planted at our camp. So they do riflery. Everyone gets hunter safety certified should they pass the test. They do shelter building, water ecology, all of the good stuff here in Michigan. And then lastly, we have communications. So other than policy, Michigan Out of Doors is probably what we're most were known for. So we owned the TV show up until the mid-2000s, and we currently still publish Michigan Out of Doors magazine, which I am the editor of. So we do a lot of things. We have a full-time staff of 10 here in Lansing, which is our capital city in Michigan, and we really are just tuned into all things conservation, and we often bring the Pheasants Forever, Rough Grouse Society, Ducks Unlimited, the hunting dog folks, they all kind of come under our tent when they need to work on broad policy issues here in Michigan.
Yeah, because you guys are planted right there in the Capitol, and earlier you said something like trying to keep politics out of it, but in a way, we're forced to play with the politics of it, right? And I don't know if this is through leaked emails. Of course, I'm being sarcastic, but you guys get like a heads up on what's coming in, right? Like when there's, let's say somebody, because we're a ballot initiative state, right? So somebody could get a bunch of signatures on something, go to a representative or in your state or your district and say, hey, I think we should make this a law. But you guys kind of get wind of all that before it gets to the ballot, right? And then in some cases you have to educate the rest of the people in the House and say, this really isn't something that's beneficial, right? I mean, you got to kind of hold their hand sometimes.
Yeah, I mean, we are really that nonpartisan, issue-focused organization, and we've had a working relationship with the Department of Natural Resources since we were founded in 1937. And with that relationship, it doesn't mean that things are always rosy. There are times we have to beat them over the head. There are times we have to provide them cover. But but that give and take is what allows us to have open and honest conversations before a lot of these things get tumbling down a road where we can't stop them.
Yeah.
The other thing we really have going for us in Michigan is we have a great outdoor heritage ethic, and folks really understand that. So even if they're not a hunter or angler, they likely know someone who does, and that really helps us when we talk about ballot box biology and unilateral decision making. But the world we're heading to, and this is across the United States, is just becoming more detached from knowing where their food came from, detached from hunting, detached from understanding the difference between conservation and preservation, which is a huge issue. That's a long way to say we are here in Lansing. We have those relationships with decision makers, whether it's in the legislature, the governor's office, the Department of Natural Resources, and we know what levers to pull and who needs to be talked to when either bad ideas come up and we need to stop them, or good ideas come up and we need to prop them up.
Right. Well, yeah, and I know you've said it. I've said it. You've said it. It's the largest organization of its type in the country. And I was talking last week I interviewed Lan Tawney from BHA, and when I mentioned that I was going to be talking to you in MUCC, he's like, "Oh yeah, everybody knows MUCC. I mean, that's the model, And that's a pretty good feather in the cap for a state like Montana and a guy like Lan Tawney to know what you guys can do. And there's so many states that either they don't have an MUCC, for lack of whatever that's going to be called in that state, or it's a very small contingent. They don't have much traction. Is that accurate?
Yeah, I would say of the conservation-focused hook and bullet, and generally we all belong to the National Wildlife Federation, which is kind of this big umbrella, and they have policies that range with things we certainly don't agree with, and we do. But in that hook and bullet cohort of NWF, Montana Wildlife Federation is one it's bigger, but not nearly the size we are. We have 40,000 members and over 200 clubs throughout the state. Tennessee has a very strong conservation federation. Missouri, so there are some states throughout there, but generally you have a staff. Montana being one of the bigger, with maybe over a half dozen or 10.
Right.
But a lot of them have an executive director and maybe a comms person or a field person. So there's 2 or 3 staff doing all this work. And when you look at MUCC, part of what has made us successful at advocating sound science-based policy is we have had people who are able to drill down and focus on these issues. So our executive director is been here for 12 years. She's versed in policy, could rattle off anything in the last 12 years from the NRC that no one should remember.
Wow.
We have a policy assistant who is kind of getting his wings in working on these issues. And then myself also dabbles. I need to know enough about everything to be dangerous. So we have 3 registered lobbyists on staff who are able to have different connections with different people where it makes sense. And that's a thing that just a lot of organizations don't have. They don't have the infrastructure or the finances to be able to do that. In moving forward, if your state doesn't have this, feel free to reach out to MUCC. Feel free to reach out to NWF and try to get something started, because as social issues continue to come up and folks become more detached from hunting, fishing, there are going to be repercussions that may not play out the way conservation has in the past, and we need to be prepared for that.
Yeah, and you and I talked a couple weeks ago to get this set up, and we were talking about R3 and do we need more hunters? Do we need better hunters? And I put this question in my head because there's pros and cons to R3, right? I mean, there's pros and cons to everything. And I think you and I are both guys who just try to, that sounds like a good idea. And I don't know if that sounds like a good idea. But I almost wonder if it's possible. Now, this is just a complete off-the-cuff thought I had this morning. Is it possible that a hunter that you recruit, because I always thought to recruit, retain, the guy already hunted, the girl already hunted, let's retain it. Let's make it positive. Let's get him, a pint night. Let's do something. Let's do a habitat project. So there you're retaining. Reactivating, I always feel bad for, because I know it's somebody who had to go to soccer games for 8 years. So okay, I don't mind reactivating them and get out of the soccer field. Your kids are in college.
That's exactly true.
Okay, buy another dog and quit whining about the last one. All right, but then recruit sounds different, right? It's like recruit says it's almost like going door to door looking for that person. But hopefully that person had an interest, and what you're really doing is kind of showing them something. But is it possible that that person that gets recruited could develop into being a better hunter advocate because they're not coming to it from going out with their buddies in high school and then their uncle in college and then growing, they didn't get that mentoring family. A lot of, like I hunted for the first 30 years of my life. I just looked at grass and woods like grass and woods. I didn't think about what lived in them and everything else that lived in them. So maybe the people that are recruited, and I'm just making this up, do a little bit more research and get recruited by somebody who's an advocate themselves for being more than, hey, let's just go hunting. Because it's got to be more than, hey, let's go hunting, even though in the end it's, hey, Nick, let's go hunting, right? But there's so many more layers to hunting, being conservation and, water, like the Grasslands Act. Land Tawney and I talked about that Grasslands Act. I can't remember the governor, or two senators that put it up, Naaman, I can't remember his name. I wrote it down. But anyway, when he said we lost 50 million acres of grasslands in the last 10 years, I was like, wait, why didn't I hear about that, right? But I did hear about it because I get the email blast from MUCC and backcountry hunters and anglers with the ability to just click on your senator's email and you're not going to talk to the senator, but it gets to the senator's ears, right?
Yeah, I mean, kind of 2 points to make on this R3 topic is the first, and I don't want to get into the Ranella brothers debate because that's a whole other issue.
That's a whole other issue.
But I think the first point we have to remember is that the folks who are recruiting nowadays are coming into the hunting conservation world for a different reason.
Yeah.
You and I likely came into it because our dad did it. Mm-hmm. Our dad had a gun. We knew someone, or an uncle, or a grandpa, or a mom, or someone brought us into the world. Today's hunters, unless they're starting at a younger age, there's not a lot of 20-year-olds who finally the heritage from their family kicks in and they want to hunt.
Right.
So they're just coming at it from an adult in a different perspective. You kind of hit the nail on the head, and I'm not sure you did, but you said, when you were growing up, same with me, we looked at forests and grasslands and said that's where animals live.
Right.
When you come at it as a 20-something-year-old and you weren't raised like that, and that's where you went out and hunted things, you have a much different perspective about ecology and everything that's there. And, oh, there's a butterfly. Yeah. Oh, shit, a rooster just flushed. There's a much different mentality when you come at it at a different stage in your life and you didn't grow up with it.
Right.
The second point with R3, and I think this is probably the most important, and to me it's something I've been trying to beat the drum on for a couple of years, and we're going to need to, is that it is awfully, awfully expensive and difficult to truly recruit a hunter.
Yeah.
And I will give you a specific point. Ian Fitzgerald was our policy assistant here at MUCC for several years. We had him as a Glasson Scholar, which is a prestigious program through MSU. He came to us as a long-haired hippie, hair down to his butt. He was a vegetarian. He had never hunted, not sure he had ever even shot a gun. He wanted to be able to walk the walk and not just talk the talk when he worked on policy on our members. So a coworker and I, Sean, took him under our wing, duck hunting. And we took him for a few years before he left us to go back out west, but we probably took him on 12 to 14 trips. He eventually bought a few decoys, but I'm still not sure that, and that's just hunting. We took him out shooting shotguns, and we took him, that doesn't count the texts and the phone calls and everything else to get him ready for that.
Right.
We did all that and put in hundreds of hours likely. And I'm still not sure that Ian would ever be a duck hunter without us. I don't think he'll duck hunt unless he goes. So this is trying to, hammer down the point that creating a hunter is very, very, very difficult. And it doesn't mean we shouldn't try to do it, but I think that we can expend our resources better to trying to make an educated voter and explain to them why conservation, why hunting is important. Because at the end of the day, you and I, yeah, we'd love to have more people in the field, or maybe we wouldn't. But what we really would hate to happen is something like Sandhill Cranes to go to a ballot box and get voted down because folks just generally don't understand how conservation works.
Right.
So that's really a long way to say that R3 is a great thing, but with that recruitment portion of it, we need to be focusing a lot more on education, in my opinion, rather than the tangible, get them out in the field.
Yeah.
Because I've seen firsthand how it's very, very hard. And at the end of the day, Ian is going to go into a voting box and he is going to vote with us 100% of the time because he understands conservation.
So maybe what we need to do is just recruit conservationists, and then they'll become the hunters, right? The ones that want to do it will become the hunters or the fishermen or the forager. But yeah, so that makes total sense, Nick. I mean, it's almost like it should have an asterisk. You know, it should say retain, recruit, or I'm sorry, it should say reactivate, retain, and recruit advocacy for conservation. You know what I mean? And then maybe a lot of this will, you know, because, you know, people will say like, well, how many hunters is too many hunters? And well, I know it's a little more crowded here and there, but we're pretty blessed in Michigan. I mean, I can always find a place to go. And, but, you know, I think it's really state dependent on how bad that can be. In states that are more publicly or privately owned, you know, there's probably people going, stop. You know, I don't know if they want anymore, but.
I mean, it's a very hard argument to apply to Michigan because we have like 4.5 million acres of state-owned land. That doesn't include federal land. That doesn't include commercial forest land. You know, so that we have far less hunters than we have ever had in history, and as much, you know, maybe not quite as much land, but a pretty comparable amount in Michigan because we have a no net loss of land policy here. So that's just an argument of, you know, people are becoming more lazy and not wanting to get away from people, in my opinion. In Michigan, you know, that doesn't apply to states where they don't have the robust public lands or, you know, they're federally owned and they have certain stipulations that go with them. So I'm not making that argument elsewhere, but certainly in Michigan, we're fortunate to have a lot of land and you don't have to go very far to get to it usually, especially if you're in the northern half of the state.
Nick, how you said something about what did you call it, a zero thing with land, like we can't lose. What was that? You said it, and I didn't write it down. A net zero.
You're breaking up a little bit, Ron. Sorry.
Did you said something about Michigan? We have a net zero land loss, or what did you call it?
Yeah, so it was under Granholm, I believe. There was actually legislation that was passed that says Michigan shall not have any net loss of hunting lands.
That's what it was, net loss. Okay.
And yeah, so that means essentially, you know, what the state in Michigan at least does quite frequently is if they have a landlocked piece of land that you can't even get, the state, you know, essentially you and I couldn't access because there's no easement through private to it.
Right.
It allows, you know, if they're going to dispense of that land, which makes complete sense, they need to purchase land elsewhere of equal or lesser recreational hunting value.
Wow.
And that's huge for Michigan.
Yeah, it is. I didn't realize that. That's fantastic.
Yes, that is huge for Michigan. And it's something that's coming into play right now with Camp Grayling.
Oh, that's exactly what I knew that we had to get to. I had 3 people write me when I said I was going to have you on. They said, make sure you guys talk about Camp Grayling. Give us the spiel on what's going on with Camp Grayling right now.
Yeah, so sometime in early July. So I guess to back up for folks who aren't in Michigan, we have a huge National Guard base. I'm not actually sure the size, but it's one of the biggest, I think, in the nation, certainly east of the Mississippi. And it brings in Guard troops from all over. It brings in international troops to train there. So it is a very expansive camp currently. It occupies 148,000 acres of public land. Wow. And when I say occupy, it does not mean that there is infrastructure on all that land, but it means they have use of that land for whatever they may deem fit, which includes training exercises, you know, whatever it might be.
Right.
And there was a proposal put forth last month there was an ask from the National Guard to expand the base's footprint from 148,000 acres to 315,000 acres, so more than doubling the current footprint. And MUCC, one part I guess I failed to mention about our policy, and it's probably the most important, is that we're a grassroots organization. So Amy, myself, Justin, we don't come up with the policies. Our members come up with the policies, and those are staff marching orders. We can help kind of guide folks, but we are told what to do by our membership. So from the late 80s, we have a resolution that we oppose Camp Grayling expansion unless there is a national emergency. Currently, we don't feel that there is a national emergency that justifies this, so therefore we are opposed. However, things aren't always that simple. As you know, you have to kind of drill down into topics. We are going to be at the tables. We don't just throw our hands up and say we oppose. Our job is to try to help bring the department, bring the Guard along with us, bring the folks who are agreement or opposition, and try to make a consensus. We can all agree this is a bad idea, in our opinion.
Yeah.
So that expansion is huge. Our main concern with it currently, aside from, we don't need to be militarizing public lands. That's absurd. Our main concern is that the base hasn't even adequately showed us a reason why this expansion is needed. So they've said they want to do, light biovac training and electromagnetic warfare training, things like that. But they haven't provided us a reason why their current footprint is not able to be utilized for those endeavors. And that really is just a red flag for us.
Yeah.
If you can't demonstrate a need for us scientifically or on paper, then why are we talking about this? And where we're at in the stage is this was asked for by the National Guard. The DNR director has the sole authority to initiate a proposal review. And what that would mean is if he decides to do so, the department would then take likely a year or more of current staff resources to understand what the Guard proposal would mean for our public lands, watersheds, recreation on those lands.
Right.
And then at the end of a year or something, that proposal would say, yes, we recommend going forward. No, we don't, or indifferent. And these are the facts laid out. So folks have to understand this is a very dynamic process. It's not as if the director tomorrow could say, Camp Grayling's expanding. Well, maybe he could, but he wouldn't likely.
Right.
This is going to be, if it even continues to go down the road, this will be a long process with a proposal first and then a decision. Another issue we're kind of staring at in the face is that when I talked about our resources, I talked with the unit supervisor up there, and his staff already have jobs. They already have duties they are doing for us.
Right.
And when I asked, are your staff going to continue to do those duties? He said, well, it's going to depend on how much of this proposal we have to undertake and look at. So there are just many concerns for us, and the feds nor Guard have offered any monetary exchange for any of this to undertake the proposal. So there are just huge concerns all over. This is a growing kind of opposition movement that really is grassroots. It's not just MUCC, although we're the first statewide organization opposed. There's Anglers of the Asable. There's several Facebook groups. Right. I imagine this will become national once it gets bigger too.
Yeah, Nick, what property is the current camp on? Is it in part of one of our state forests, or is it literally U.S. government? Are we able to use parts of Camp Grayling?
It's state land. Yeah,
it's state land.
We are able to use most of it. So actually, if you've ever, I don't want to hot spot any people's grouse stuff,
right? But it's over there. It's over by there.
Yeah, so I hunt grouse on this, and I listen to the base officer say, "Well, we don't close our current lands." And I think once he said that, he bit his tongue, and I was just thinking, I literally was trying to hunt last year, and there was shelling going on in a place that there wasn't the year before, and there was a gate blocking it. So, bullshit. You are closing public land occasionally. So it's, in the Guard has been a good partner, I think, to the DNR in some aspects, but in others they haven't. And this is what has folks concerned.
Yeah.
In back to my original point, do we need to be militarizing Michigan state lands for freedom? When we ask the Guard, why do you need to do this? The consistent answer is, don't you like freedom? Well,
yeah. Sure we do.
That's not an acceptable answer.
I like water too.
Yeah. I like hunting and I like public land. I mean, there are a lot of things I like. So that's just not an acceptable answer.
So it's not like they came up and says, oh, here, just bullet point, it's going to be this, it's going to be fine, we're not going to do this. They didn't even sell it good. It's just like, hey, we need twice as much property, and without an answer to the public of what could become of that. Because if the current, you said, was 140, 150,000 acres currently?
148, yep.
So they can do, let's say, maneuvers or boot camps or whatever they do. So they can kind of close off an area, because it's not all fenced, right? It's just gated in areas.
I think the only part probably fenced is the actual infrastructure of the base itself. The rest of it is, the majority of it is public land you and I could go hunt on.
Right.
That occasionally you might hear a mortar go off.
It's funny you said that. I was judging a test down in Rappahannock, Virginia, and I'd always come up through I would say the interstate system, and one time I came in through the back way, and it was a fort. And it says you're entering Fort, whatever it was, not Hood, but a weird name. Anyway, I'm coming through this back, my navigator's not working, and I'm like, I just got to stay on this road till I get to something that looks familiar. And all of a sudden, the same thing, I hear, I said, oh my God, I'm driving through. Now, I did not see the ground explode, or anything like that. I'm sure they kind of pay attention to that. But I'm just driving through on this. There's not another car on this road. And all of a sudden, I hear shelling going off. And that's a little unnerving, And
you're saying, what the hell did I do to my wife?
Right, exactly. You start looking. The only time I was more scared than that was we were in North Dakota a couple years ago filming the Upland Institute and getting some B-roll. And my buddy Matt, he was standing there with a drone. We got this really beautiful drone footage of like the three of us walking with dogs. It was pre-gun season. And there's a body of water down. And you couldn't find, like, people should go to the commercial just to watch this little video part, right? And Matt's standing up where we parked the car, and it was right by an oil derrick, right? And I come back, and Matt says, he said, man, Ron, I got this thing that says you're entering restricted airspace with your drone. And I thought it was like the oil, because there was an oil derrick, right next to us. And we were taken there by, Tyler Webster, who lives there, right? And finally, I get back first, and I said, Tyler, come here, look at this thing. I said, what's going on here? Are the oil derricks restricted airspace? He goes, no, but that Minuteman missile silo right over there is. So, I mean, hey, we didn't hear any booms, thank God, but I didn't know that, like, if you did the wrong thing like if Matt's drone would have stayed over there, somebody would have been knocking that drone right out of the sky, and we might have had an answer to something. But so it's not like that at Camp Grayling, but you do hear some kabooms going off.
Yeah, I think another point to make is that the camp, even in their half-hearted proposal, half-hearted in my opinion, out of one side of their mouth they say we will not close land from November 15th to November 30th, which is our firearm deer season here in Michigan.
Yeah.
But then out of the other side of the mouth, they're saying we're not going to close land. So why do you have a period that's going to be open in the proposal no matter what, but then say you're not going to close land? It doesn't really make sense to me.
Right. The door's never going to be locked unless it's locked, is what you're saying.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's exactly it, and I'm going to start using that.
Yeah, I know. That's exactly what it is. I've always hunted more, West Michigan, Mitten, northern, way up north, and then over the UP. I've never hit the Camp Grayling area, and apparently that's a lot of acres. That's a lot of acres.
It is. It's very sandy soil. It can be tough walking sometime, but it has a lot of what grouse need with the thermal cover bordering aspen stands.
Yeah.
Especially later in the year, it can be good. Right. But yeah, I mean that whole area of the state is good, and the middle area in general. We banned a lot of woodcock there too.
Oh, nice. Yeah, and you do that with your small Munsterlander, right?
I do, with my Munsterlander and my short hair. Yep.
You can get the short hair to stand there that long?
Yeah, I mean, my short hair has been excellent on woodcock since day one, and that created the problem with grouse.
Yep.
Because of the crowding. So
Yep.
it took him about 2 to 3 years to finally figure out that grouse are a different bird you can't crowd. But yeah, I have no issues with holding point. In fact, he's generally steady through fall. I've kind of let that go the last few years. And when you're in the grouse woods, everyone knows, no matter how well trained your dog is, shit goes out the window as soon as that bird gets up and it's a grouse and you're shooting.
You're gonna
and your
shoot.
dog's excited and you're excited. We train to get something, and oftentimes in the field we get about 20% of what we train for, which is why we train to such a high level.
Exactly, because you don't want it to turn into like my buddy Paul's dog that everybody famously knows called 10-pin, who when he smells grouse goes in and tries to hit him like a 10-pin, right? But I want to get back to some policy and stuff. But when you said something about the woodcock, I was talking to a guy that I know is a very accomplished grouse hunter. And somebody asked him, like, how is it that you and your dog are that good at grouse? He goes, we don't shoot woodcock. I mean, it's a thing. I'm not saying it's an easy bird. The dog's still got to hunt. He's still got to look for him. But they're so cooperative when they naturally sit there. You're right. The dog can be closer than he could ever get to a grouse. I mean, unless it was,
I mean, to give you an example, we catch hens with nets in the spring. I mean, that is a common tool for woodcock banders. You're not going to catch a grouse. I don't care if there's a net under it. It's going to lure you away from it.
Unless that net was dropped from the sky about the size of a circus tent.
The other thing for folks is that's oftentimes their first bird dog, and they want to reward that dog in another problem that folks run into is they woodcock habitat tends to be easier to find or easier to walk through sometimes.
Yeah.
So that is where they tend to hunt. And there's I'm friends with a guy named Dennis up in UP, Dennis Stackwitz, owns Aspen Thicket. He, if you're getting, and he always says this, if you're getting into woodcock covers, and not that grouse and woodcock won't cohabitate, get out if you got a young dog.
Right.
Go get your dog grouse scent in its nose, because that's going to make a grouse dog. Yeah. And that year or two you got to do that is going to pay off for the next 6 to 8 you get to hunt.
Right. A perfect time to do that is after the season. The woodcock are out of here. Take a young dog out and look for what grouse are around. You don't even have to shoot them. Just get that dog looking for grouse. But let's look for something like sandhill cranes right now. I know it's kind of a passion project. I've been going out to my training grounds every morning getting the dog ready, and there's 4 of them in the one field every morning, and there's 3 of them in another field every morning, and everywhere I go I see them. I know farmers can get a permit to for extra, what do they call that?
Depredation.
Depredation. And a farmer can do that, but farmers really don't want to set up a blind and you know what I mean? It's not like the farmers are going, oh, great, we have a crane season. Are we closer? Are we farther? What's the thing and what's going on?
On the first point, I want to make clear that farmers certainly are not doing that, and that would be illegal.
Right.
It has to be a depredation permit. It has to be evaluated by someone at the feds in order to do that. And then once those birds are shot, they actually cannot utilize the meat test to lay there in the field, be burned, or donated to a food bank, which the latter I hope most people do, but I doubt they do.
Right.
So in Michigan, to kind of get the lay of the land for folks, and this has happened throughout the Central Flyway, as we're seeing, I think Alabama just instituted a season a few years ago. The crane population has started to really explode.
Yeah.
In 2010, the Michigan DNR was part of a flyway process that really gathered biologists from throughout the flyway. So from, Louisiana up to Michigan, and even I think some folks from Canada were involved. Mm-hmm. And it also included the feds. And they came up with a management plan in 2010 for sandhill cranes in our unit. And what that plan really called for, I guess our units are different. We're talking about the eastern population of cranes, so not the mid-continent or the Colorado River Valley where they do a little bit of hunting. We're talking about the eastern population. Those numbers have, exploded. So early in the 20th century, these birds were near extirpated.
Right.
And it was, it's a conglomeration of things leading to that, from overhunting, wetland loss. We were raping the land and the resources to try to build our state. And we with the onset of the conservation movement in North America model, that bird species recovered on the backs of hunter dollars and Pittman Robertson dollars that allocate excise taxes from firearms to states. So currently we have somewhere near a couple 100,000 cranes in Michigan, I believe, recommended or estimated. Excuse me, 100,000 estimated. But in that 2000 plan, what the Flyway came up with were 5 really key points that need to be hit in the plan focused on. Trying to find my notes here. The first was that we need to solve farmer depredation issues. So we need to figure out a way to lower that. Another part of the plan was to make sure that everyone is educated about sandhill crane conservation, their benefits, but also who funded the conservation of those cranes. And the third was to provide, and this is important, from all of these Flyway biologists and the feds agreed, to provide a 5-year count between 30,000 and 60,000 cranes. Mm-hmm. So they said at a low end, we should have at least 30,000. At the upper end, we should have no more than 60,000. Currently, we sit at roughly about 100,000 cranes throughout our Flyway. So, and then the last goal of that plan was to provide hunting opportunities. Right. So states throughout the Flyway, such as Alabama, who's a recent state, Tennessee has a hunt, are starting to institute these hunts. But in Michigan, and this is kind of where we've been at, we have a policy MUCC does, asking that if the science is there, we should have a crane hunt. This becomes a very politicized issue because it is an iconic big bird that folks kind of associate with prehistoric beings. They're magical. I don't know if you've ever been out in a field, or we've decoyed them to goose decoys. I've had them fly over my head low at Shiawassee. They are very magnificent and cool birds, and they're not easy to hunt either. Folks should realize that even if there were a hunting season enacted, it's not as if they're going to be killed in any real number. Right. So, I don't think that anyone argues we need to get rid of them, and no one is. But we would certainly like our biologists in Michigan and in the DNR to follow through with what they committed to in that 2010 Flyway plan. Right. Saying that if we've hit a certain threshold, there's no reason we can't offer this opportunity to hunters and conservationists who, frankly, led the charge in rebuilding that population. Yeah. Yeah, then there goes to, social science and biological science, like you said. It's like, oh, here we are the door's open, but it's really locked. The gate's open, but there's a lock on it, That's so frustrating. And again, you're right. I've hunted them in Texas one time. In fact, anybody who wants to watch that episode, it's on season 3 of Meat Eater, when I'm using a 10-gauge gun and missing cranes. I did hit some, but you're right. They're not easy to hunt. If there was a season, I'm sure it would be, 1 or 2 to start with. They would. That's the beauty that people don't realize. To give you an idea, Tennessee, Kentucky, and Alabama are the current 3 states in our Flyway that do have a hunt. Mm-hmm. The most recent hunt that was initiated in Alabama, what folks had to do was first take a class online so they could identify a sandhill crane versus a whooping crane. Right. They then are issued 1 permit, and it's in a kind of a lottery draw. So, in Michigan, we would possibly be talking about units and maybe one per hunter. I could pretty confidently say that the number we currently kill on depredation permits would be higher than what we would actually kill hunting.
Right.
So, if the argument from the anti folks is that, we don't need to get into that, but it is, I can confidently say that we kill more on farm depredation permits than we likely would under a hunting season.
Right. And, I've never seen, because where I see them, it's always in a hayfield this time of year, So what do they do? They hit the cornfields when they're just planted? Is that where they're most destructive?
So, yeah, what they will do is once that seed is dropped in the ground, they'll actually just walk right down the row and pick the seed up one after another, and they'll wipe out whole rows of corn and acres of corn. There has been some development of a seed called Abapel, I believe, that they put on the seed, and it's supposed to be a deterrent, but that's expensive.
Right.
And I don't think there's a ton of subsidies for farmers to do that.
Right.
So it's for especially the few remaining non-commercialized farms we have left, and we in Michigan we do have a fair number. They just can't afford that seed.
Right.
They can't do that, so they're left with having to get depredation permits, shoot the animals, and leave them there to rot.
Yeah,
which is unfortunate.
Yeah, and that just you'd almost think that how could somebody who, let's say, was opposed to, if you could get that information to the voter or to Mrs. and Mrs. John Q. Public, if you made sure that they knew if we don't have a season, that people are going to still shoot them and they're going to lay there and rot. Now, that you would think that message would be like somebody would say, I'm not really in favor of hunting them. Oh my God, I don't want them shot and left there to rot, or feed a skunk or feed a crow or whatever. Yeah. And, you'd seem like that would be a slam dunk, but what, is there anything currently that people can do, write their representative or is this something people could still keep knocking the door in Lansing about?
Yeah, so I would say kind of where we're at. I have had conversations at length with the feds, with U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, and we have a green light. Essentially, if our department were to bring forward a hunt plan that abided by the 2010 management plan we helped develop, and it specifies what you have to do and what you have to meet. If our department were to bring that forward, the feds would approve that. Okay. I mean, that is pretty much all but a foregone conclusion. So the issue we're dealing with now is that in order to establish a game species in Michigan, it has to go through either the Natural Resources Commission or the legislature. Right. At MUCC, the legislature is not an appropriate place for any natural resource decisions, in our opinion. Right. Because what happens is the Republicans hold it, then the Dems hold it, and then they switch back and forth, and you get really politically driven policies. Right. So we want these management decisions to reside within the Natural Resources Commission. Right. But the NRC is somewhat beholden to the DNR, and the DNR director is appointed by the governor. Oh. So, and our governor has a base who probably does not want sandhill crane hunting. I can't speak to that definitively, but I would say that her folks would tend to fall more in that camp than in the pro hunting camp. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So you can imagine the tough place that our director is put into when he was appointed by a governor, and he has a commission who's saying, man, we'd love to do this if we had the right information presented to us. And I have had off the record, on the record conversations with commissioners. At one point, we probably had all but one in favor of this. Mm-hmm. Now that has changed a little bit, maybe with some new appointments, but it's an issue where it just seems like folks on the NRC and at the department, especially in the higher levels, are throwing the political football around instead of actually focusing on science-based management in the plan that we helped develop.
Right. And you sent some notes to me before we started, And this isn't just something that's plaguing Michigan, right? This decision making where commissioners are losing their ability to really do their job because of these.
Yeah, I mean, a great example is Washington State, I believe. They just, the Department of Natural Resources came to them and said, we need to have a spring bear hunt. And I don't know all of the intricacies of that, and I don't pretend to know other states' game laws, but they wanted to have a spring bear hunt. The DNR said, this is why we have to do it. Here's the biology. Here's the science.
Right.
The commission said no.
Just no,
without
even, yeah.
And I would because it was a very close vote, I suspect that you could look at affiliations on one side and in the same affiliate or a different affiliation on the other. And that's another important part for folks to remember about, especially the Michigan Commission, is it is required to be bipartisan. So you can't stack it with Dems, you can't stack it with ours.
Yeah.
It has to be bipartisan. But how folks have started to get around that is they claim they're an independent. Once we start to learn about some of their policies, I start scratching my head and saying, oh, well, that was a convenient way to get appointed, but I'm not sure that that's actually how you believe.
Right, right.
So, yeah, I mean, the Washington decision was very disheartening. New Jersey lost their bear hunt several years ago, and I believe that was a commission issue. New Hampshire just had a hound beagling issue come up in front of them that I think they actually went the right way, but this is starting to play out across the country where we're seeing political appointments and political motives bleed into conservation and science-based decision making. And it's not as if we can't pretend that everything we do is science-based, and especially in Michigan, because it's not. We do have social regulations that are created all the time. However, at the very foundation and core of those decisions is likely a science-based management decision that is not going to negatively impact the resource. Yeah. And that is just not being followed throughout the country. And it's frustrating, and it's something I think we're going to see continue to happen.
Right. And that goes back to what we were talking earlier about the whether you're a hunter of 40 years like me or 20 years like you or brand new, being an advocate and paying attention to this stuff is going to be more important than just buying a hunting license. They've just got to pay attention to these things and join a group, whatever it is, because I would say all the groups under MUCC's umbrella are thinking mostly like we think, right? I mean, but I was guilty of not being, I didn't join the Twin Lake Gun Club, but wouldn't have hurt, right? I mean, when I got here, I joined PF so I could go to a banquet. That's getting a beer in you and bidding on a picture is not really conservation at work. It's a little bit of fundraising and a lot of fun, but it's not what we need. We got to somehow, when I was talking to land, we talked about this Grasslands Act that they're going to try to put through. And when he said, he goes, look what they did with the Clean Water Act in wetlands, right? Now, it's still not a perfect thing, but nowhere, you can't even build like a new office complex out, let's say out in Howell or something. You're going to have to have a body of water on that. It's going to help something. There'll be some ducks or geese or muskrats or, something's going to build a nest around there. Because you could get people to go like, oh, water? Oh, yeah, water's important, but we got to get that message that like all this is intertwined and everything's just as important, and right down to not letting game commissioners lose their ability to set the game laws. Like, kind of seems like that should be. That's like saying, you know what? Let's have a sports team, but let's have all the dads be the coaches. Let's not have a coach. They kind of know what they're doing. They like sports, right? But there's a reason you have the coach do the coaching, right? Yeah, that's frustrating. And, it's just, it's since I've met you and, paid more attention to things shamefully late in life, I don't want those people that listen to my show to just go hunting. I don't want them to just go hunting. I want them to pay attention.
It's not going to be around for you if that's the mentality we all have.
Right, yeah. At some point, it may not be in my lifetime, because that could be over in the next 10 years, 20 years, or tomorrow. But yeah, my grandkids, just they're barely walking. Yeah, it could be a whole different sight picture for them. So yeah, we absolutely have to pay attention to stuff. When people get the emails, not only just joining a group like MUCC, maybe just joining your local rod and gun club, because like you said, they're under your umbrella. And those things, I hate to say it, you gotta read the emails. Don't just click them and delete them. If it says act now, read it a little, see what it is, because at some point it's gonna reach you being whatever hobby and passion you have out there.
There's really 2 points to make with that, and I think the first, it sends me back to a quote from one of our past presidents and from the UP, and he said, "The world is run by people who show up."
There you go.
And that is absolutely true.
Yeah.
And the second point in that is that social media, and I don't mean to poo-poo on social media because it seems like everyone does. It's given us a lot of great things, but it's also created the ability for people to just scratch the surfaces of topics and act like they know what they're talking about.
Yeah.
And when we couldn't disseminate information like this, we didn't have that issue. And when you grew up,
right,
people really had to learn about an issue in order to talk about it, because they were, that's just the way it was. So you don't get to, that's a long way of saying you don't get to stand back and throw stones when you didn't even dive into the issue or try to understand what it was.
Right.
And that goes back to the world is run by those who show up. And showing up doesn't mean you have to come to the commission meeting and sit next to me as we testify about cranes. It could mean that you read an email, understand what's going on. It could mean, you donate an extra $30 to MUCC to help us send a kid to camp. There are a million ways to engage with conservation that don't have to purely be policy focused, but we cannot continue to argue about issues in this world where, and this is not just conservation, where people are not educated on the facts of the issues.
Right.
There's far too much misinformation and misunderstanding being thrown around, and it's bleeding into the conservation world, unfortunately.
Yeah, to paint the world's worst picture of hunting's future would be, think how sick we get of the commercials for politicians when there's an election coming up. And it's almost like they're lying. And if you don't know, you're just going to pick the side of someone who's lying to you. So you gotta pay attention. You do. Let's talk about something a little less, well, no, we do have one more thing we wanted to talk about. Just touch on the pheasant hunting initiative, how that went, and is it moving forward? You mentioned it was kind of on the teetering a little bit. What's going on with that?
Yeah, so in Michigan we had a pheasant stocking initiative come forward. It was actually an MUCC resolution. My first day on the job in 2017, it was passed through our membership, and it really asked that we create a program that planted birds on public land for R3 endeavors. It had a very good first season, and it was received well through hunters throughout Michigan. What we did shortly after was then initiated a stamp that folks would have to pay $25 to hunt on public land in the Lower Peninsula or HAP lands if they were 18 or above. MUCC, myself, we would have preferred to see habitat money also included in that stamp.
Right.
Unfortunately, at the end of the day, politics kind of won, and it was earmarked solely for birds, which is fine. And then COVID hit. Yeah. So it kind of threw a wrench in all of this. We had a year or two without running the program. The long story short is that this year in 2022, it is poised to be back. It may not be as robust as it was in some years past,
right?
But I think hopefully they're hoping to start to build some money in the pot so that they continue this. One big priority for myself, and I hope our members will understand why this is important, and I know we have some who certainly do, and will have resolutions to the effect, but we need to also ensure that habitat is included in the stand.
Right.
We need to, because again, it goes back to, you're just creating someone to go shoot shit.
Right.
If you don't help them understand why they can go do that,
Right.
what they're doing it on, what the importance of that all is, it's all lost. It's
Right.
all for naught. And it really is just a good time to go have on a Saturday, and then they never think about it again.
Which you could do on, I don't know how many preserves we have in this state already. You could do that all
over
over
100, probably 200. We have a lot.
We have a lot, right. So, yeah, if it's going to continue and grow, it's got to build into something better than just
and sustainable.
Than just a cheaper place to go look for a pheasant, because and if that's what it's turning into, then we got to kind of turn that wheel a little bit and pump the brakes and make it more encompassing. So I agree with that.
Yeah,
like I said, I grew up in Illinois, and Illinois had a state program. In fact, Michigan had a state program, but I wasn't living in Michigan back in the day. And that was how me and my friends got into, bird hunting. But to your point, they didn't turn us into advocates. We just thought it was a fun thing to go shoot some birds, right? And we all know, we've said it 8 times already, it's more than that, Speaking of more than that, let's get a dog report, because, we're and some hunting stories from last year, because I got some doozies. But how you've got, in all honesty, I don't want anybody to think I have a great memory. I had to ask Nick all of his dogs' names before we started. You got Calvin's your SM, Summit's your GSP, and Annie's your lab. Now, you didn't have Annie, or you were just getting Annie. You've got a real variety there. I'd almost say you've got about everything you need to hunt, across the country. So
except for a beagle.
Except for a beagle. Oh, I'll bet you. Let me see. Let me look down here. I bet you could get Calvin interested in a rabbit. Come on,
We shoot quite a few over my short hair, so he'll point them, hold steady, jump them, and shoot them.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, my journey through dogs really was an interesting one, because I grew up outdoor heritage hunter in that family, but it was always brown goats in the forest. We didn't hunt deer, not literal goats, but
yeah.
That's how I grew up, and bird hunting was really kind of just an afterthought with my grandpa. And I harvested my last grouse before my adult life when I was 12, the first year you could small game hunt, shot it on the wing with a 410. And I don't think I grouse hunted again for, 15 years probably.
Yeah.
Until I got my first dog. And it just so happened my wife and I were looking for a short hair. We met a great breeder we liked, and we knew we were going to get that, got on a list, and then this small Munsterlander popped up as a rescue dog. People had what they thought were aggression issues, other issues with it that just turned about he's just a curmudgeon and he's a good hunter.
Yeah.
So we rescued him for literally nothing, pretty much. And that kind of started my journey down bird dogs. And I was like, oh, this is going to be awesome. And then we got a short hair, and I'm like, oh shit, the short hair's crazy. But now he's awesome. It just took a few years to get through that crazy stage. But yeah, it was, I really hadn't hunted over dogs until 2017. So I'm by no means a expert on the subject, but I dove in. I spent for the first few years, probably 20 hours a week training my dogs. And
Right.
That was for NOBDA work. That was for HRC work for my lab, trying to really meet the people that could help me succeed and make my dogs do well. And I thoroughly enjoyed that. And now the dogs have really become, I don't think I would hunt birds, and I don't hunt deer anymore. I maybe go out a day, and I don't call it hunting. It's grocery shopping.
Yeah.
But I don't think I'd hunt if I didn't have dogs anymore. Someone invites me to go on a duck hunt and there's not a dog. It's like, nah. I'll go across the road from my house and just take my lab.
Right.
Right. It's for me, it's really become the reason I hunt, and it bleeds into woodcock banding and training. So it's a year-round activity for me.
Yeah. So you're not apprenticing woodcock banding. You're a full-fledged woodcock bander?
I am, yeah. So I apprenticed for a year or two under the Downers, who are kind of woodcock banding royalty here in Michigan.
Mm-hmm.
They provided Andy Ammon, who's our grouse father here in Michigan, bird biologist. He's developed a ton of nationally used studies on grouse and woodcock. They provided him the first setters that became the Michigan banding line that now some folks carry on through the DN. They called it the DNR line.
Yep,
But
I've heard of that.
those were Wixel setters to start out. So I had the fortune to meet that family, meet Abe, meet his mom, Sally. Sally's 70 years old, and she's still getting out there woodcock banding. And, it wasn't that long ago that she was banding the most woodcock in Michigan.
Wow.
So I learned from some really good people in it. It's just another one of those points where if we can help the outside community see the things we're doing that aren't just shooting things,
right?
They start to understand and become an educated voter. And that's what woodcock banding is for me. I've taken the former DNR director, Keith Cray, out, hoping to get some commissioners out and just kind of see that we're not out here taking, we want to give back to and help science.
Yeah. No, that it speaks volumes, but the little dirty secret is it's so much fun. It's so much fun. And like you said, going through the dog, I don't want anybody to think like, oh man, after listening to Nick and Ron, I am getting that dog. We got to give you the warning, right? We should have a warning at the bottom of this episode. This can be very frustrating, very difficult. If you spend your time yelling at the dog, you've done something wrong, and I know you've spent some time yelling in your years of doing it. And I mean, I really thought that, well, I'm pretty loud. My dog's going to listen to me, and then it's almost like the hunting with the dog is just like learning about conservation and hunting. You learn about all those layers, and like you're looking forward to the next dog because you're like, I know what I'm going to do better. I'm going to get that foundation, and that goes to the woods and the waters too. I know it. Like I finally did a logging project on my property. I had a bunch of oak trees that squirrels were happy, And we got rabbits to the point where I can't let a dog out right now because we got brush piles. I mean, I should invite somebody who's trying to, problem is I'm on a county sand road. I wouldn't want to go through, well, a couple of my neighbors wouldn't care, but, I don't know if I could give a big enough place, but I'm telling you, if a guy had a young beagle and he just wanted to get his nose into some rabbits, come to my house for a night or a morning. But, I never did that. I looked at those trees like, oh, look at those trees, right? And I was like, you can't believe what my woods look like. My wife said it looked terrible, and like you can't see through it now. Everything's coming up, and it's the same thing with dogs. You get into dogs because it's kind of like, oh yeah, I need one. And then if you really get into it, I mean, it's, I don't want to just say it's going to add years to life because it could take a few years off your life in the training part of it, but when you finally get a dog that does the job for you, it really is an arm of conservation. Like you mentioned duck hunting. I watch a fair amount of YouTube. I'm sure we're all guilty of watching some. And there's a show that's real popular. And every time I see the guy getting out of his blind and walking across, a flat to go pick up his duck or having to shoot it again with another $3 shell, right? Instead of just sending a dog after it. I'm like, duh! Have you never had a dog retrieve a duck for you? I mean, that's one of the, to me, it's, when a dog brings you the game back, I mean, it's until you see it, especially with your own dog. Sometimes it's your other person's dog that you see do it, your friend's dog, you're like, I'm getting one, How good or how old is your lab? Where are you at with the lab now? You said that's your youngest one.
Yeah, so my lab has a not a CH, but a hunter and retriever title.
Mm-hmm.
So she's the seasoned level. She's went through all that. We have not run any finished tests, but we've certainly done the work. With another endeavor I'm working on this summer, that kind of took away from my training time. But I'm excited to see what she's like this fall without having applied, because my lab the lab world is just different than pointy dog world, and labs require more force oftentimes and to do different things, so it's very like force to pile is a very repetitive training technique that my Munsterlander could never do that. My short hair did it and does it just fine, but in the lab world, it's like if you don't force fetch your dog, you're kind of laughed out of a room. And I don't mean to say that people who don't can't achieve this with a conditioned retrieve and achieve the same thing. But force fetch is just it's the industry standard. Right. So I learned a lot of things with my lab, and I made a lot of those mistakes with my 2 pointy dogs. You hit the nail on the head when you talked about yelling. I spent the first year of dog training yelling. And yelling and yelling. And sometimes it worked, but it didn't work a lot of times. And I had to kind of dissect, like, what is this dog thinking, and what is it? When I yell, it's getting more confused. So that is just hurting what I'm trying to do. And I started to really be able to back up and look at the problems I was having, dissect them, go through my network, work with the people I knew to figure out those issues. In the arc of dog training, I would say, I started where I had to yell. And then, like everyone, we have the best dog ever, and your dog will never be as good as mine. We think that. And now I'm down here where I'm like, yeah, my dogs aren't the best of their breeds. I've hunted over much better dogs than mine. But I love them, and they're my dogs, and they're what I got. So
and you don't have to yell at them all the time.
Yeah, I don't need to yell at them because it really is. I know what they're going to do in given scenarios. And if there are things that bother me, it's going to take work to change their behavior if I don't like it. It's not something you can go out, for example, our grouse season starts September 15th. You don't get to take your 1 or 2 year old dog out on August 15th and expect it to nail grouse points the first day. I'm sure there are a few grouse that are going to do that, or dogs that are going to do that, but it's not a realistic expectation. No. It takes work, and it takes a lot of work. And oftentimes, the dog is going to probably flush more birds out of range than you could have shot walking without a dog.
Right. So. Yeah. It's you always, when you hear that, you're like, oh, tell me that. And then you look down, you watch, you're like, yeah, that was him. That was my one grouse the hour, But yeah, when you get to successes, boy, there's not much that can make you happier than when you get to success. But you said something about the lab work. You're right. I can't tell you how many back in the day. I'm still talking steel shells, but which were still expensive compared to lead. But like my course of action was, well, here we go. Throwing the shotgun shell out into the water to make a splash because I did not bother to train my dog to force to, like, you could get your dog now, he could understand, like, I didn't see it go down, but you're sending me in that direction, and so far in my life in the yard, it's been successful, and then when it clicks, when he gets a nose full out there, yeah, maybe then you don't have to keep throwing sticks and shotgun shells out there. But I've been like down to a handful of shells, like, damn, I can't throw. I'm going to have to go out in that damn water and get that duck, or do the,
I mean, to even back it up a little bit, so much of what we do with labs is watching. Like, a lab's best tool is its eyes to start, and when you get to hunt around a good lab, and I'm not saying my lab is extraordinary by any means, but she does the work I ask of her and she will handle. Right. And when I start to reach for my gun, her eyes start to go like this. She's looking all around and scanning the sky and waiting for it. Yeah. If I hit a duck call, she'll pop right up out of her blind and her head is up looking for where that duck is at. So those are just repeat motions we've practiced thousands of times in the yard to get her. When this happens, there's going to be something flying, but inevitably, like you said, we'll drop a duck that we can't see, we can't find. Right. And I don't even want to say it's taking I don't mind going to retrieve a duck if I do, but there are a lot of times we sail ducks into spot that we just are never going to find it without a dog. 100%. You don't have a nose. You could have marked it perfectly, but you're just not going to find it. Right. And having the ability for me to stand back, send my dog 50, 100 yards, whatever it might be, and handle it into that cover so it can use its nose and then be able to have its independence out there and use that nose to find it.
Yeah.
I mean, that's just a relationship that took hours and hours and hours to build.
And weeks and months.
When I started doing that, handling work and blind work, for me, that was some of the most fun dog training I've ever done, because now I literally have a remote thing I can tell to go do things.
Right.
I can stop it out there and I can handle it over here and back, and I can do all these cool things. And I do it a little bit with my pointy dogs, but not to the extent with my lab.
Yeah, I mean, pointers, like when I had to get ready for the Invitational, I think it was 2005 or 2006, I can't remember. And I had a dog that qualified, through a prize one. I had to lean on a good friend of mine who was a lab trainer, and luckily Zygon was every bit of a retriever. His last name should have been German wire-haired retriever. It really, because it would have been a better name than Pointer, trust me. But he took to that. But I had a lot of fun that summer when I saw, like, wow, I can get him to go a little further. I can stop him and I can signal him. I was shocked. Like you said, not every pointing dog can do it. But when you can get one that can do it, I mean, a lab is still, if you're a waterfowler and you don't have a lab, I don't know what you're doing. I don't know what you're doing without a lab if you're a heavy-duty waterfowler. But now if you live in, South Dakota and you hunt in the middle of a grain field, shoot, bring any dog out there. As long as you can get them to lay down and be quiet. But, and how many times the best is when you're not having a good day, especially duck hunting. Doesn't happen in the grouse woods. But you're sitting there, and your dog is still paying attention to the sky, and you're over there looking for a granola bar, right? And your buddy goes, and the dog's going like, hey, what the fuck?
Coming at you.
Right. And by that time, it's a twist and turn shot. You're like, oh, and your dog's got to be like.
And then the dog looks at you and gives you the middle finger.
Right. Yeah. Oh, if they could talk, we wouldn't hunt with them. I guarantee it. Have you taken some out-of-state trips with the dogs, Nick?
So shortly before we talked, I think on the last one a few years ago, I had went to North Dakota.
Okay.
We did Sharpies out there, and that was my first season. My short hair was excellent on sharptails, which was frustrating because he couldn't hunt rough grouse, but he did really well on sharptails. And it was the opener, so they hadn't been pushed around, they hadn't been pressured. But we were able to go up into the Badlands and kind of walk where Teddy Roosevelt did. We went down to Medora and saw his cabin.
Yeah.
Not to hotspot those of you in North Dakota, but and it was phenomenal. I mean, it was an experience I want to get back to. We were able to find some pheasants. We couldn't shoot them because it wasn't pheasant season.
Right.
But we were actually, a really cool moment was we were working the Sharpie field, and my short hair had pointed a covey, probably a 4 or 5 sharptails. I was really nervous because I didn't hunt any grassland birds. So I did not want to shoot a hen pheasant.
Right.
I didn't want to shoot a rooster. And I didn't know until I get up and I heard that sharptail laugh, and people had told me about it. I'm like, oh, that's a sharptail, but I didn't shoot. But immediately after I swung on those and never shot, a goose got up from a pond next to me, flew within 10 yards, and this was a poor decision then. I had a 20 gauge with 7 steel, and I pulled up and dropped that bird stone dead, and my short hair had still been on point, turned around, retrieved that goose, and brought it back to me. And it was like, that was my first goose ever, and then the next day we shot our sharptail. So that was a really cool out-of-state moment. I've been hunting now in Arkansas and Missouri a few times. I haven't been able to take my dogs down, although last time I was in Missouri, the snipe were there thick. And I think if I go back to duck hunt, I'm going to take some pointy dogs and try to do some snipe stuff with them. And then this fall, I will be going to South Dakota with one of your future guests from Cedar Run Decoys. And we'll be going out,
Corey Lucas?
out trying to hunt. Yep. So I'm excited to get the dogs out there.
Oh yeah, it's for me, I don't know if I like hunting in one. I like hunting in different spots. Like I said, first time I had sharptails go up. I mean, it was many years ago. But the first thing I thought was, oh, those are all hens. Like that's how little like I said, you go out there. I'm going pheasant hunting, and have I really ever seen a flock of hens get up together? No. But I was like,
Doesn't matter. You're still scared.
I'm still scared. Like, they're brown, but they're not really brown. They got white underbody, you know. But all those little adventures, it's like I took a friend out who does all my videography and my website. And when we finally get to North Dakota, he's like, I was going to ask you on the phone because we always drive separate. And he says, I don't even know what they look like. I said, well, and as soon as he saw some, it was easy to put it together. But I mean, I had I'll leave that one off we'll leave that one off the record. I'll tell you that one later. Mistakes have happened, but you're right. But the excitement of going somewhere new. When you said snipe hunting, you got me all like tingly because I've read a couple articles about it. And that's what I love about the periodicals. Even your magazine and all the other magazines. I'm like, that sounds like fun, and you could use a pointing dog, and I'm all in. So you let me know how that goes for the snipe hunt.
Funny story, actually. This spring, I had a day, and I have numerous photos of my short hair pointing snipe on nests during woodcock banding season. So I have a spot I frequent for grouse during the hunting season, but it also is a good woodcock banding season or a woodcock banding spot. And it just happened to be more wet this year for that particular area, which is not what the rest of the state experienced. But
right.
I had my short hair point, I think, 3 different snipe nests, and I was able to see, because they point, and I get to looking, and I'm like, well, shit, there's the hen. And then I'm like, that's not a woodcock. And I'm looking at it, and then it starts making a peeping noise that's not a woodcock peeping. It's a different noise.
Right.
And I'm like, what is this? So I'm pulling my short hair back, and I'm trying to send an email to our wetland waterfowl biologist here in Michigan. Like, is this snipe? Is that what I'm finding? And it turns out that's what it was. So it was very cool. I'm going to try to hunt some snipe here in Michigan. We do have them fly over our decoy spreads regularly in the early season, teal season, which you can actually hunt snipes during.
Right.
So I'm going to try to do it. But down in Missouri, it was, the whole field. You'd get out of the blind that's in flooded rice or whatever you're in, and it's only 6 inches deep. In some spots are dry and all that, and you start walking. We flush hundreds of them.
Oh,
just getting up and walking, and so I want to take the pointy dogs down there and see kind of. It'd just be fun retrieving, fun to hunt a different bird.
Oh yeah. I would if it wasn't for distance of travel. If somebody told me there was a new thing in Colorado, and there's a lot, of course, when you hear a lot of them, that always gets us a little excited too. Oh, a lot of them, because I'm only so good, so a lot of them would help for opportunity per hour, And I promise I won't ask, are we going to get a dove season? But I will tell you, on my year, I know, it's sad, but it's just Michigan.
So doves is one of those perfect examples of why ballot box biology is a bad idea.
Right.
We're one of a few states in the United States that can't have doves, and that is specifically because the Humane Society of the United States brought in millions of dollars to spread misinformation, disinformation about the species, and ultimately hunters didn't show up in the voting booth, and we lost. So this is why we're not just trying to recruit new hunters, we're also trying to educate new conservationists.
Yeah.
We don't want cranes to end up down the same path that doves did. Right.
And so my year is going to start off with the whole family going to our place in Virginia that I had for work, and we turned it into a rental property. So two of my daughters, 3 of my son-in-laws, we're going out Saturday, the opener, and then the Monday holiday, which leaves my one son-in-law, one daughter who's pregnant, and my wife to watch the whole batch of grandkids while we're dove hunting. And I pulled it off. I guess we're going to do it. So, yeah, I'm starting there and then heading to North Dakota, then Wyoming, and then back here for the glorious month of October.
You hunting sage grouse out in Wyoming?
I'm going to do a little of that. Jess Johnson from Wyoming Wildlife Federation, she kind of had I ran into her. They invited me to come out and do a talk years ago, and then they had it's I'm sure it didn't come across your table, but it probably came to your ear and your eyes when Wyoming was trying to get where people could go out and collect sage grouse chick eggs incubate them, and try to use that for restocking. And and it was just a bad idea. It doesn't work. They're not going to get anywhere with it. And I had her come on the podcast, and we talked about it. Don't know that I did any good, but at least I thought, hey, when she said, can I come on and talk about this? I'm like, why not? Of course, And so then she was gracious enough to invite me out there, and we'll chase some sage grouse. And I've shot a couple. I've shot 3 sage grouse in my life. I'll be happy if I shoot one more. It's not like it's not a hard target. If you can find them, it's probably the easiest bird to drop out of the sky. I'm not saying if they once they
hold
get
well for points.
They can. It's like they're either going to be gone or they're going to hold, and it's usually a lot of walking, but then when you get to the right area, just seeing them go up that big of a bird in a covey, I mean, that's another one. It's like, oh, and then when you get a big one, you get a boomer, you're like, wow. I mean, this bird weighs 6 pounds, it weighs twice as much as a mallard duck. But you know what? It's 3 times easier to hit than a mallard duck. I mean, it gets up like, whew, I'm tired. When you hit a sage grouse, they're probably at about 8 feet off the ground because they're still climbing, and then they're down. So, yeah. That's something you'll
definitely
have to.
A bucket list bird for me.
Yeah.
I wanna get out there and do that. Another one is a chucker. We had a sharp-tail translocation program that was going to happen in Michigan a few years ago, where they were going to try to translocate North Dakota birds to our northern Lower Peninsula, where sharp-tails were everywhere before we deforest or after deforestation. But
Right.
that didn't end up panning out. But that gentleman who was going to run that is from Utah, and that's his jam with draughts is chucker hunting up and down those canyons. And he's pressured me several times, and I need to go do that, because that would be another bird where I've shot them on preserves and farms, but I'm not sure that that's indicative of chucker hunting.
No. Well, you let me know how that one goes, because I get that invite 5 times a year, and I've turned it down 5 times a year. I'm a little too old to be running up and down shale hillsides. But I've been told that when I go where I'm going to go in Wyoming, that we'll probably get into some, what I was told was surprisingly easy chucker country. And I'm like, surprisingly easy? Sounds interesting. But all the way to Nevada or Utah, nah, I ain't doing it. But I want to know how your hunt goes if you ever do it.
Yeah, that's going to be an exciting one, and one I look forward to. That and sage grouse. I've never had the chance to go out there, and I'm hoping within a few years, especially with everything that's going on with possible listings and I mean, I don't want that chance to slip by.
Yeah, I mean, that state, that bird, people don't realize when something gets listed what that can mean for, not just extraction, for farmers and everything. It changes the game, and they managed to keep that. They managed to keep that season where, if enough people didn't get together on it, it would have been closed, and it would have been gone. And then the restrictions, because of that bird being not managed anymore and just protected, it changes the landscape for everybody, from farmers to ranchers to, the oil extraction companies. They hold their feet to the fire when they do projects out there, is from what I understand, And I'm sure, like you say, we have this net zero. I did not know that till you said that we can't lose land without replacing it. So back to Grayling. So unless the National Guard can come up with an extra 150,000 and convert it for us, I don't think we want to go there.
Yeah, I mean, and it's the answer of freedom is not an acceptable answer. We all love and cherish freedom as Americans. We are Americans because of freedom, and no one is going to dispute that. However, that's just not an acceptable answer for a more than double, when we're talking about hundreds of thousands of acres, to double the footprint of a base who hasn't even adequately explained why they need to double it.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Well, maybe you can, keep me posted on that, and I'm sure you guys will keep the public posted. If you're not, if you live, you don't even have to live in the state of Michigan to see what MUCC is doing, because I think if you're, let's say you're in Indiana and Ohio, I mean, if you're that person that can say, why don't we have this, But I encourage everybody who is a hunter in the state of Michigan that please, support MUCC with the subscription. We do it with, RGS and PF, and you guys don't hold banquets and raffles and like they do. But you're the front line. You guys are our front line for those bad bills that come through and the good bills that come through. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I would say, there's a reason Pheasants Forever and Rough Grouse Society belong to MUCC in Michigan.
Right.
And that reason is when things come up that affect pheasants, that affect forestry, that affect grouse, we are the organization with the finger on the pulse of the legislature and the Natural Resources Commission. Those national organizations generally do not have policy staff throughout states. People like land, they work on big federal issues, but they oftentimes don't work on state specific issues.
Right.
So yeah, please, if you're in Michigan join Michigan United Conservation Clubs. You get not only access to our robust grassroots policy process, which literally you could come up with a resolution, and this happens frequently. That language could actually be the bill language that gets passed and signed by a governor. We have pictures of members with governors having the idea they had signed into law.
Right.
So that's not out of the realm of possibility. And then, in addition to that, you also get Michigan Outdoors Magazine, which is a 100-page quarterly, and that is a tangible product you get. And we have made a effort the last 5 years to kind of broaden the audience of Michigan Outdoors, really change the topics we talk about and make it more centered on the stories of Michigan hunters and the different type of people who are doing that, rather than the listicles and top 10s of how to kill a deer. Everyone has read those a million times.
Right.
We're trying to focus on the features and stories that make Michigan's natural resources and outdoor heritage special.
Yeah.
And it's something I take a lot of pride in. I am a staff of one. There aren't a lot of quarterly 100-page magazines that can say that. So it is something I'm very proud of, in addition to all the other work I do for MUCC.
Yeah, no, my hat's off to you, Nick. And 3 dogs. Are you ever thinking of a 4th dog now, or are you gonna stay at 3? Or are you getting?
I mean, I guess you could call a kid a 4th dog. Can we put e-collars on him yet?
Not yet. No. I guess if we could write a bill and put it up for ballot proposal initiative, we could put e-collars on them. You got one of those coming?
Well, my wife and I are in that stage of life where that's probably the next step. I'm always wondering and trying to figure out a way to get that beagle into the pack, because I have rabbits. Literally, I could probably shoot 3-4 rabbits a day until I've extirpated them. It would take a while, but I think that would give me some time in March when things slow down, or February and January, and run around. But I have to yield to my wife on this one. She has put up with my crazy and my adventures, and she lets me, through the fall, I'm gone for weeks. On vacations, at camps, all of that. We do our own grouse camp, so I'm very fortunate to have a wife who allows me to do that. And if kids is what we need, and I'm excited about it too. That'll be probably our next step, not a dog. Yeah.
Well, no, hey, you won't go wrong with that step. Trust me. And, I see people that, I know a very good friend of mine, and I won't say his name, and I know he'll know I'm talking about him. He says, yep, we're not having kids. We're going hunting. I'm like, yeah, just wait a little bit. Because that's just going to add a layer. Getting a kid is going to like your first dog, Nick. You're going to like, holy cow, I didn't know you had to train them. But once you get that figured out, you got an extra set of hands around the house.
I'm also to that point in my kind of hunting conservation journey where I spend 20 to 50 hours a year trying to mentor new people. Right. So why doesn't that be my kid?
Yeah,
it's kind of like this is me trying to give back. And I find as much enjoyment in the youth hunt for ducks as I do for my opening day at teal, where I actually get to pull the trigger. Right.
Well, I'll make a toast to you it's early, so it's a Diet Coke, but here's to you and your wife being successful. And And don't forget, try a lot and try often. It's it's the path to success. And later on, off camera, I can tell you if you want a boy or a girl. You know that I know you know biology enough. They always say it's the man. You know the way the magic works. It's the man that decides the gender of the child, right? It's the way it is. And after we hit the pause button here, I'm going to tell you the secret to that.
Well, everyone should want more women because they're better shooters and better hunters.
Exactly. Right. All right. Nick, thanks for coming on. I'm going to hit the pause here.